There are absences that feel more like earthquakes than farewells, because what you lost wasn't just a person. You lost the inner world you once built in the space between their presence and your soul. It wasn't just their voice, their gaze, their touch. It was the sacred geography you created around them, the soft certainty of being someone when they called your name, the quiet joy of imagining a future while wrapped in their silence. You lived in that space, not as a guest, but as someone finally at home. Carl Jung once said that relationships carry a symbolic function. We don't merely love people, we project our deepest potential onto them. They become the mirror where the parts of ourselves we never dared to live begin to speak, to breathe, to matter. That person became more than just a figure in your life. They became the altar upon which your soul placed its longing, its faith, its becoming. Greg Braden speaks of the heart as a magnetic force that shapes reality. You didn't just feel something, you built something, an invisible architecture of meaning, rooted in emotions so deep your nervous system memorized them as truth. And when they left, you didn't just miss their presence, you lost the place inside yourself where life once felt possible. This is not ordinary grief, this is spiritual displacement. You're not asking, why did they go? You're asking, where do I go now that I no longer exist in the world we dreamed together? This isn't just heartbreak. It's the silent implosion of a sacred realm, where the most tender version of yourself once lived and believed she belonged. There are departures that don't happen on the outside, they implode within. You still wake up remembering the way your soul used to rest in the quiet gravity of their presence. It wasn't about them alone. It was about the person you became when they looked at you with soft eyes. It was about the sanctuary you built in their voice, the safety you found in the shared silence. When they left, the world didn't just lose someone. You lost a version of yourself that only existed when you were seen through their gaze. That's why it hurts in places logic can't touch. Because what you built wasn't a timeline, it was a temple. A symbolic space filled with rituals no one else saw. The texts that became your mornings, the imagination that turned ordinary days into meaning, the identity you wore like a second skin. I am someone who is loved. Jung would say, what collapses isn't just the bond, but the structure of meaning we unconsciously lived inside. That person didn't just hold your heart, they held the coordinates of your inner sky, and when they disappeared, the constellations went dark. Not because love failed, but because you had never just loved them. You had built a psychic world inside their presence, and now that world echoes, like the ruins of a dream that once felt real. There is a violence hidden inside well-intentioned advice. Let go, they say, as if the soul were a hand that simply needs to release its grip. But you are not holding on. You are inhabiting something that was real inside you. What you lived wasn't disposable. It was sacred. And the pain of its absence is not a failure of detachment. It is the echo of depth refusing to be erased. Jung reminds us, the psyche does not forget. It absorbs, it integrates, it makes meaning, not through forgetting, but through symbolic digestion. You didn't just lose a person, you lost a whole language of being, the emotional grammar that once gave shape to your days. To be told to move on without mourning is to be asked to silence your own becoming. To amputate a truth that once gave you identity, color, presence. The soul doesn't let go of symbols, it circles them, returns to them in dreams, in memories, in quiet questions that surface at night. And perhaps what looks like resistance is actually reverence. Because some connections don't need to be undone, they need to be translated. From longing into wisdom, from absence into deeper presence, from pain into a new kind of selfhood. Some people don't arrive to stay. They arrive to reflect, and sometimes what you mistook for a home was actually the mirror where your soul first recognized itself. It wasn't their voice, it was how your truth echoed through it. It wasn't their eyes, It was how you felt seen inside them. It wasn't their presence, it was the presence you accessed when you stood beside them. The warmth, the peace, the inner aliveness you miss. Maybe it wasn't them. Maybe it was you, meeting the part of yourself that had been buried beneath years of silence. Because there are bonds that do not just give love, they give permission to exist, to imagine, to become. And when they're gone, the ache is not just loneliness, it is exile, not from them, but from the world you finally believed you could inhabit. Jung would call it a projection, but not in the way of illusion. A projection as revelation, the soul seeing itself through the other like moonlight reflected in water. And now that they've left, the mirror has vanished, but the light, the truth, the vision, it was always yours. What you built inside them wasn't false. It was sacred, it was real, and it is still waiting to be lived. Sometimes what breaks isn't your heart, it's your field. Gregg Braden reminds us, the heart creates the strongest electromagnetic field of the body. Emotions are not just feelings, they are frequencies. And when a bond is formed, even silently, your body begins to align itself to that resonance. You didn't just imagine a connection, you lived in it physically. Your nervous system adapted to the climate of their presence. Your breath matched their silences. Your hopes synchronized with a story you carried inside. Even if they were distant, even if their love was uncertain, the possibility was enough to keep your system believing. Enough to keep your heart pacing in rhythm with something sacred just out of reach. And then they vanished, not with violence but with absence, and suddenly your body was left without the echo it had memorized. The way a room feels colder, not because the heater turned off, but because it had once been warm. This isn't weakness, it's energetic collapse. The dissolving of an emotional climate your body had once called home. You're not just missing them. You're recalibrating to a new atmosphere, one where the resonance has gone silent, and your soul must now learn to breathe on its own. Not every heartbreak comes from what was. Some come from what could have been. Carl Jung understood this kind of love, not as illusion, but as symbolic truth. A person becomes the vessel for something far older than the relationship itself. A myth, a longing, a piece of your soul trying to return home. You didn't just love them. You loved what their presence awakened in you, a story, an archetype, an emotion so profound it bypassed time and memory. They were never just a person. They were the image onto which your unconscious poured everything you once silenced. Your hunger for beauty, your prayer for safety, your secret need to be chosen. And so when they left, or when reality failed to match the vision, it wasn't just disappointment, it was disorientation. Because you hadn't simply lost a relationship, you had lost the temple you built inside their silhouette. The grief isn't for the facts, it's for the emotional sanctuary that lived within you. A private cathedral of feeling, painted with dreams, held together by a faith you didn't even know you had. And now, that inner altar is empty, but the devotion still lingers. Not because you're trapped, but because what you mourn is sacred. It mattered, even if it only lived inside you. There are goodbyes that don't close a door. They leave it ajar, letting wind and memory slip in. And so you try to move forward, to fill the space, to forget. But nothing truly settles, because what you lost wasn't a person, it was an emotional architecture, a way your soul once lived, once dreamed, once trusted. The identity you accessed in their gaze has no replacement, because it wasn't just about being loved. It was about becoming someone you barely recognized, but deeply longed to remain. You try to begin again, but new places feel strange, new people feel distant, because the center from which you once moved is still cracked. And here is the truth, Jung would whisper gently, the psyche cannot rebuild from outside in. It must re-anchor meaning where it was once projected. The map must be redrawn from within. You don't need another love. You need to reclaim the essence of what their presence once made possible in you. Until then, no external shift will bring peace. because you are not chasing them. You are searching for the place inside yourself where life once opened. And that is not obsession. It is the soul's way of asking for its sanctuary to be rebuilt, brick by brick, from memory, from silence, from truth. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. She didn't cry for the messages. She didn't ache for the kisses. What she missed was the space she became when he called her wild, visionary, free. In his presence, something ancient in her reawakened, a part that had been buried under years of self-doubt and silence. With him, she remembered the girl who painted without shame, who danced without music, who believed even for a moment that softness was strength. And when he left, that temple collapsed, not because he was everything, but because through him she had finally touched the version of herself that felt like truth. What followed wasn't heartbreak. It was a fall through layers of identity that no longer made sense. She walked through days as if language had abandoned her, not because she needed him back, but because she didn't know how to summon that same magic without his echo. And yet, healing came, not quickly, not through logic, but through a quiet decision to speak to herself in the tone he once used, to call herself wild, to believe she was visionary, to walk barefoot into her own sacredness, even if the voice that first named it had vanished. That's how she returned, not to him, but to the place he had once opened, now guarded not by memory, but by reverence. Not all losses are endings. Some are initiations. There comes a moment, quiet, often unnoticed, when grief stops asking for what was and begins to whisper what must now become. You are not just mourning someone who left. You are being called to reclaim the sanctuary that once lived inside their presence, but this time rooted in your own breath. Carl Jung named this movement individuation, the sacred extraction of your soul from where it was entangled in the other. It's not detachment, it's recognition that what you found in them was a fragment of you, longing to be made whole. And now, the soul asks, can you rebuild the world you once inhabited through them, without them, not as imitation, but as resurrection? You were never meant to live inside someone else's gaze. You were meant to remember who you are when you feel deeply seen. To become the place where your tenderness has a name, where your visions are welcomed, where your love is not just given, but received by the one who matters most, you. What was real can live again, but this time, not in projection, in presence, in the slow return to your own sacred center. The home was never them, it was always you. There are griefs that don't ask to be healed, they ask to be understood, because what you're feeling is not just about someone who is no longer here. It's about the place within you that once awakened when they entered. You didn't lose a person. You lost the emotional geography where your soul finally felt seen, where dreams had breath, and your heart dared to open fully. That terrain still lives in you, but now it stands quiet, waiting to be remembered without pain. Greg Braden speaks of the heart as the generator of the body's most powerful field, meaning you have always been the source of the world you thought only they could hold. Carl Jung once wrote, "Your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." This is not the end of your story. It is the threshold of your awakening, the moment where your soul stops waiting for someone to return and begins to walk back into the world it once created, this time not as a guest in someone else's gaze, but as the sovereign keeper of its own sacred light. You are still the home. You are still the mirror. You are still the echo of everything that was real. If you made it this far, comment below, "Estoy despierta." Let your voice become part of the collective ritual, a silent chorus of souls remembering the loss was real, but so is the return.